But for the time being, focus on me. No, focus on God, hopefully, through me. Yeah, we could have some sort of lighting. Would be lovely. There it is. Hey-o. All right. So, last week we talked about our mission statement. And I'm going to give you guys the easiest quiz of all time because, hint, you can see it from here. Who can tell me our mission statement?
He doesn't remember it's a week?
No.
No kidding.
We talked about it last week. Could somebody, yeah. Let's all say it together. Let's just breathe it as a community. How about that? So here we go. Called to love, sent to serve, rooted in Christ. That's our mission statement. So keep that in mind as we're going forward. And hopefully you all remember the awesome sermon I preached last week about it from Matthew 10 and the story of Jesus calling his disciples into community and then sending them out to serve the world. This week we're going to look at the words of Paul in one of the most famous chapters, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter, as it's often known. So, let's read that. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. And when I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. This is probably one of the most famous passages in the Bible, mostly because it's used at weddings all the dang time. And, I mean, really, why wouldn't it be, right? The middle of the chapter is a beautiful description of what love is. And so the thing we have to remember when we approach this passage, because it gets so caught up in the wedding stuff, is that the love Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians is not specifically romantic, married love. Instead, Paul is telling us about God's love and the love that we have for one another in Christ. And that doesn't mean that these words don't also apply to romantic love. If you can remember back to December, I know it kind of got overshadowed by something that happened right afterwards, but I did preach a sermon about how romantic love is one of several ways that we can love one another in the love of God. So while these words can be used romantically, they also have a broader purpose. Paul begins the chapter by exploring the importance of love. He says, if I can speak in tongues but I don't have love, then I'm nothing but a crashing cymbal. If I can prophesy and understand the great mysteries of the universe but don't have love, then I'm nothing. In other words, Paul is saying our spiritual gifts are only meaningful when they come attached to love. What good would it be for us to prophesy to the world if we don't have the love to back it up? Paul knows the truth, which is that without love, Christianity is worthless. No souls can be saved without love. No generosity can be sincere without love. Love is not just vital to our message as Christians. Love is our message. All of those things that Paul talked about, prophecy, spiritual gifts, charity, it's all about the love we've received from God in Jesus Christ. And as we freely receive that love, we're called to then give it to one another. So we have to remember that love is the basis and the ground for everything that we do. When we give to the poor, when we give them money, we also should be giving them love. When we speak a word of truth to someone, we need to also be speaking love into their lives. Love is the most important thing in the Christian life, as Paul makes really clear. But the good news for us is that Paul doesn't just leave us hanging by telling us that love is important and then not telling us how to love or what love looks like, right? After making it crystal clear that love is everything to the Christian life, Paul graciously informs us what love is so that we don't screw it up. So he starts with, love is patient. If you want to show love to others, you can't be so busy that you don't have time for them. Love says, let me slow down for you, not hurry up. Love is kind. And that one's pretty obvious, right? Showing love to someone means treating them with respect and kindness rather than meanness or anger. Being kind doesn't mean that you never have to speak a difficult word to somebody, never have to reprimand them. There's going to be times for correction and things like that, but correction can be done with kindness. It doesn't have to be rude or mean. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. To love someone means to think of them more than you think of yourself. Love celebrates someone else's happiness rather than resenting it. To love means to acknowledge that you're not the sole undisputed master of your life, but instead, your life belongs to the community of love. Love makes us humble as we realize that we're not above others, but instead we're called to serve them. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Forgiveness is key to any type of love. It's impossible to love someone when you're keeping hold of all the ways that they've wronged you, intentionally or unintentionally. One of the great dangers when we don't forgive is that we keep a record of all the wrongs that someone has done to us and we turn a blind eye to the ways that we've wronged them. And usually that leads us to doing that person even more wrongs, even if it's just being kind of angry and resentful to them for the things they've done. So we have to remember that God has forgiven us already. God loved us so much that he forgave us, even though we didn't deserve it at all. And we can learn to forgive others if we remember first that we have been forgiven. Love rejoices in the truth, Paul tells us. To love someone means to be honest with them. Sometimes it's tough because there are times when being completely honest with someone is likely to hurt their feelings. And if you just told them a little white lie, it doesn't seem like it would do anybody any harm ever. But Paul tells us that love rejoices in honesty. And it's better to be honest as long as it's done with kindness. Because love wants to see someone grow and thrive because of honesty, rather than feel good but stay stagnant in their current position. Love always protects and trusts and hopes and perseveres. The love of God gives us the courage to protect others from harm. Kyle, if I can get that picture up real quick. Maybe? There it is. Perfect. So on the screen here, I don't know if some of you have seen this picture before, it's an image of Egyptian Christians making a circle around Egyptian Muslims during the early days of the Arab Spring movement in Egypt, before it turned violent. So when it was still a non-violent movement in the earliest days, there were these communities of both Christians and Muslims who were protesting against the government. And this is a picture of Muslims at one of their times of prayer throughout the day. They're kneeling, and you have a body of Christians who've encircled them to protect them from government attackers, government soldiers, and keep them from being harmed while they're praying. Those Muslims might be considered our enemies, right? A lot of times we hear them considered as enemies, but they're being protected by their Christian neighbors. That's the love that always protects, right? God's love compels us to stand up for those who cannot defend themselves. Love gives us the faith to trust others too, to hope for the best. In a world that's cynical and untrusting, we should be the suckers who trust and hope. It doesn't seem smart, right? There are so many ways that this world and the people in this world want to take advantage of you. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be smart. Just last week, we read in Matthew 10, where Jesus encouraged us to be not only innocent as doves, but also as wise as serpents. So we're to use our discernment. But that can really easily devolve into not trusting anyone. Paul reminds us that God's love trusts. God's love hopes. And finally, Paul says, love never fails. Everything else is going to pass away. Prophecies are not going to have a purpose someday. Speaking in tongues won't be necessary someday. But love will always have a place. Right now, we only understand God in part. That's why we need things like prophecy, like speaking in tongues, like the other spiritual gifts. This is the childhood stage of life with God. I think sometimes that's funny for me to think about. Because usually I think of somebody who's using their spiritual gifts as somebody who's more mature in their faith. And that is true. Paul tells us that you can mature while you're here. But in this passage, Paul is reminding us that even the most mature Christian on earth, who's still living, is still in the childhood phase of faith. The phase that only ends when we meet God face to face. Because now we see things dimly. But then we're going to see everything fully. For now, those things are good. Those spiritual gifts are good, but later they're not going to be needed in the same way. Love is not like those things, though. Because even after prophecy is gone, after tongues are gone, after charity is gone, there will still be love. And why? Because God is love. If everything else is stripped away and only you and God remain, there is love. That's why Paul stresses love so much throughout the chapter. Love is essential to the nature of God. And so it should be essential to who we are as followers of God. At the very end of the passage, Paul tells us that 3 things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these, he says, is love. Because someday even faith and hope will pass away. Hope is the expectation of future joy. And someday that future joy is going to be present. And our hope will give way to joy. And faith is the belief in those things that we hope for, but we can't see. So if hope passes away into joy, and what is hoped for has come, and we shall see it with our own eyes, then faith too will pass away in the presence of God. But love does not pass away. Love only grows deeper and richer as we spend time in the presence of God. So now, in this life, we need faith and hope just as much as we need love. Those 3 are all important together. But someday, our faith and our hope will be fulfilled, and only love will remain. So this, in a nutshell, is the great love chapter of 1 Corinthians 13. The purpose is to remind us that love is the most important thing in the life of a Christian. Without love, everything else that we do is meaningless. It's all meaningless because one day it's going to pass away and only love will remain. So that's why we say err on the side of love. If you don't know which choice to make, choose love. Because God's love is poured out in grace to each of us. And so we should pour out love and grace to those around us. So, tonight, may we remember what love means. May we practice putting love into action by being patient, kind, humble, honest, trusting. May the love of God fill our hearts and our lives so that everyone we meet will be touched by God's love in a powerful way. And now I invite you to gather into groups of 2 or 3 or 4 and spend about 4 or 5 minutes in prayer with one another, and hopefully recall to one another the ways in which God's love has been at work in your life. If you feel comfortable, maybe even sharing the ways in which you may have failed with God's love, and allow your brothers and sisters in Christ to comfort you, to bring you back into God's fold, to show you the ways in which you can continue to grow in God's love. So please, gather into groups and let's spend a few moments in prayer.